Gather round for another episode of The Reaper's Rights. This is the story of a haunted porcelain doll. The account comes to us from the memory of the recently deceased male, age 56, died halfway through accomplishing his goal of reading through the entire Merriam-Webster's dictionary. His first encounter was as a boy himself. He was riding home from school as he had done every other day, and on this particular ride, he encountered many police sitting outside of a house with a door wide open. There was police tape so as he could not cross and was certain there were people talking inside. At the opening of the door, there appeared to be shards of porcelain everywhere, like someone had smashed toilets. One large toilet smashed in front of the door, and one toilet smashed on the steps on the way down. He never did find out what happened, but the sight stayed with him all of his life, until he and his son Billy returned home from Christmas and New Year's abroad. They came home as they normally did, to find that the house was exactly as he left it. There was no lights on, and all the doors were locked. Once inside, they could see that the living room was in a state of mild disarray. There was a bag on the counter. It was Billy's change of clothes which they forgot, and much to Billy's disappointment, had to wear the same things day in and day out for an entire week. When the father went to investigate his bedroom, he was disappointed to see that he had not cleaned it before leaving, and for that reason was more surprised and, quite frankly, happy to find that his son's room was immaculate. So surprised and happy was he that he made a comment to his son.
"This is really awesome,"
he said.
"This is in fact probably the cleanest room you've ever had."
But Billy could not remember cleaning his room. In fact, he was certain he hadn't. But it did not make sense that someone would break into a house to clean a room. Nonetheless, the discovery was unnerving. Check the room though they did, they could not find anything different. All of his belongings were as he had left them, except stacked neatly. His bed had been made, the floors scrubbed. The only thing that they could see that was different was that there was a porcelain doll that neither of them had seen before, with painted pink, chubby cheeks and bright blue eyes. His hair was soft and long, and he had on a striped pajama over a beanbag body. And it was sitting on a high shelf in his room.
Weird.
They said in unison. he decided best to remove the porcelain doll and put it straight in the trash can, while his son prepared for bed. Then, after kissing his boy goodnight, he checked all the doors to make sure they were locked. The next day, the father woke up, and he went to the kitchen to find that his son had already eaten cereal, left a dirty bowl on the counter, and was busy playing video games on the living room TV. Though the kitchen remained dirty, he was surprised to find that his son had cleaned up the luggage and stuff that they'd left from their entry the day before.
Hey, thanks for cleaning up,
he said, trying to encourage his son.
Yeah.
The boy answered without so much as looking away from the TV screen. But before the father could relax to a bowl of cereal of his own, he noticed the porcelain doll overlooking the room from up high on a display cube. This doll would appear in different places of the house each day, having cleaned a new area.
kind of the opposite of Elf on the Shelf.
He thought. And it continued until every room was cleaned at least once. A horrible problem to have, I know. One morning they found it, propped up against the front door with a plate in front of it.
I think he wants to be paid.
The boy said. Convinced then that the boy had inadvertently given himself up by suggesting payment to a porcelain doll. The father next was very angry with him and sent him to his room.
If you want money for chores, ask for it like a grown boy,
he said. And when Billy continued to deny, he became so angry, he took a hammer and smashed the doll's face. The father had a difficult time sleeping that night, worried that he'd taken things too far. And the next part he would go on to describe to policemen and to anyone who would listen, staring blankly in front of him, his tone icy cold.
Something woke me up in the middle of the night.
He'd begin and describes heavy footsteps down the hall. Too heavy to be his son's. Too heavy to be an intruder who is trying to stay hidden. The sound was so alarming. It took a moment for him to gather his courage. But finally he did peer out into the hall, and there, walking just out of sight, was an enormous figure. Too big to be a man. A bear, perhaps. So he took a breath and continued forward until he could see into the kitchen, and there, in that dimly lit area of the house, in the moonlight, he could see that there was a giant porcelain doll trudging through the house, cleaning as it went. Its back was turned, and Without thinking much about it, he went to the counter and picked up the hammer. And before the thing could turn around, he lifted it up high and hit it over the back of the head. It turned, of course. As it turned, it pulled the hammer away, and then he was met with its large, blue, unblinking, painted eyes staring at him. With large, hard, cold fingers, the doll easily pushed the man over. And the doll then fell on top of him. He could feel its crushing weight and could feel it getting harder and harder to breathe. Burned into his mind were those pink, painted, chubby cheeks, book-ending a large smile. The father reached desperately for the hammer, grabbed it, withdrew it, and then clobbered the doll again. This time over the eye. Now its face was cracking with fissure-like spider webs. He hit it again, and finally could free himself. Then again, and again, and again. He continued until there were pieces of porcelain all over the place. And in the shell of the porcelain doll's body was the unmoving body of his son, Billy. And it looked as though he were freshly cleaned. He never saw a doll like that again, but warns if you ever do, thank it and offer it money to leave. Another delightful memory to share with your friends. Test 1, 2. Pink, painted, chubby cheeks, chubby cheeks.